Welcome back to another shambling, stinky, decomposing episode of What Happened, the show where we raise the dead on the... I have so many of these zombie puns. But let's not waste our brains on the preamble, but rather cut to the core of today's subject, The Walking Dead. No, not that Walking Dead. Or that one either. No, we are setting our crosshairs on Overkill's Walking Dead. But is it Overkill's Walking Dead? No, kinda, because it's kind of actually Starbreeze's Walking Dead. Maybe, screw it. Okay, to make sense of this jigsaw puzzle that spans over 18 years and cuts across all over the Kingdom of Sweden, we're gonna need to rewind back to the dark, dreary time age that was the year 2000.
I believe that one of the most dangerous potentials of Y2K is that we could be pushed overnight into a cashless society.
50% of the origin of this particular Zambambo-based disaster starts with Starbreeze Studios, founded by one Magnus Hogdahl, whose first title was a little-known RTS named The Outforce, which was met with a fair amount of enthusiastic apathy. In fact, most of Starbreeze's early output was met with much of the same until 2004, where they finally made a splash with one of the best movie game adaptations of all time, The Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher's Bay. From there, Starbreeze would develop the original Darkness, and then the remake/sequel to Riddick, Assault on Dark Athena, and things, were looking positive from there on out. Unfortunately, the start of the end of Starbreeze comes with one particular title from one particular publisher that, oh no, God, Jesus, no. Syndicate was a reboot of the EA property and ditched the detailed, rich cyberpunk world and tactical gameplay for a generic FPS that recalled Starbreeze's earlier days of mundane but solid games that didn't really stand out.
Nice.
Bolstered by a terrible marketing campaign that left a bad, dubstepped taste on the tongue, it was actually finished by a skeleton crew of employees, as a good number of staff all just quit to join up with Machine Games before Syndicate even hit store shelves. Funnily enough, Machine Games was founded only a few years before, ironically enough, by the original founders of Starbreeze, including that Magnus robot fighter guy I mentioned earlier. So upon Syndicate's release in 2012, this bleeding of talent coupled with commercial disaster of it, Syndicate purportedly only sold 150,000 copies worldwide, is what caused Starbreeze to immediately spiral into the verge of closure. Enter their savior, Overkill, or, well, technically Starbreeze was their savior, but in reverse. Jesus, we'll get to that mess in a bit. Just know that for now, together, both companies came roaring back with the Payday series and inked a huge deal to make a cooperative online shooter based on The Walking Dead, a show that had been losing its luster for years both in the TV and game spaces, but certainly still had the potential to see a big player base and even bigger profits. Flush with cash from Payday, over Starbreeze Kill looked like they had another hit on their hands, but fast forward to 2019, both companies are now imploding. CEOs have been fired, all the money is gone, and The Walking Dead has a current player base of about 1,000 people. So, what happened? I think honestly an easier question would be what didn't happen, but let's try to get all our zombies in a row here. Next up on the shooting range, Overkill Software. This company has its own unique history of failure, but in the interest of time, here's the cliff notes. It was founded in 2009 by two brothers, Ulf and Bo Anderson, after their previous company, Grin, made a bunch of bad video games, with each one losing more and more money until they just kinda went bankrupt. After that, the sibling duo founded Overkill and then put out 2011's Payday to modest success, but never quite set the world on fire. Overkill wanted more money to fund a sequel, and here is where the dimensions intersect. Starbreeze needed a lifeline after the failure of Syndicate, and since both companies were based in Sweden, they just sort of bought each other. Publicly, it was announced that Starbreeze had bought Overkill, but according to an article published by Eurogamer, link in the description, it was the other way around. Ulf and Bo Anderson were given a bunch of worthless shares in Starbreeze during the transaction and wound up with majority ownership of the company. This trick actually worked. It kept both companies afloat and, with their cash combined, set to work on Payday 2. Fortunately, due to the emergence of cooperative online games in 2013, the sequel fared amazingly well and was considered the stupid sexy hot ticket at the time and would go on to sell a combined 9 million units. It was also around this time that both Loki and Thor Anderson butted heads a bunch over creative differences, which resulted in Ulf leaving the company with his sibling buying out his half of Starbreeze. Ulf was considered the more creative, hands-on type of guy, but without both of them steering the ship, Starbreeze was headed towards some rough goddamn waters. From then on out, all major business decisions were left to Bo, which resulted in what we like to call big, dumb, hilarious mistakes. What followed were a string of disastrous business deals that saw all the profits from Payday 2 quickly drain into things that never really took off or were even needed in the first place. Chief among these was investing in a French VR firm named Infinite Eye and redubbing it Star VR, where they would specialize in, quelle surprise, VR games. They also opened some studios. Lots of studios in Los Angeles, San Francisco, another in Paris. The list goes on and on of expenses that Starbreeze didn't really need, but took on anyway. The one deal that did seem like it had a lot of potential was in 2014 when Bo Anderson approached Skybound Studios to produce a new Walking Dead title. It would be a cooperative online FPS that would feature events, promotions, and incentives, always to try and engage the player. The Ballistic engine was chosen to power it, a bit of tech that had run the first 2 Paydays. This choice, however, didn't last long. In 2015, Starbreeze publicly announced it had purchased the Valhalla game engine and intended to use it for all their incoming titles, and that The Walking Dead would be the first to do so. Starbreeze programmers charitably described Valhalla as a piece of shit and unworkable, and lamented that the engine wasn't even really finished, with a best estimate of it being around 60% complete in terms of its base functionality. If you do the math, it's pretty hard to make 100% of a game with an engine that was working at 60% of that in 24 months, the time Starbreeze had to deliver The Walking Dead, as it was slated to come out sometime in 2017. That clearly never happened. They struggled with Valhalla until it was clear 2017 was not going to be a realistic launch year, and thus announced the delay. This extension of time didn't really change matters though, since Valhalla lacked a reliable core in which to build off from and still had severe stability and crashing issues. It was then that even tone-deaf Bo Anderson and other senior producers admitted there was a problem. Valhalla wasn't working out and there was going to be an engine switch, so they went with Unreal 4, like most sane people would have. The problem with all of this, however, is that Valhalla wasn't cheap, and the smaller Starbreeze offices all over the world were all making assets for it, so all the money spent was essentially just burned, with the ashes being flushed down the toilet, inside a building that was seconds away from being demolished. Now, because of the difficulties of Valhalla and it being vastly different than Unreal, very little of those assets could even be salvaged. A former Starbreeze employee stated, in regards to the senior project producers, it was as if switching to Unreal was going to just solve everything. In their minds, it was magical, but we had other problems that couldn't be fixed just by changing the engine. The goal was to produce a AAA multiplayer game in a year on Unreal. Anybody with common sense knew from the start it wouldn't be possible. That's right, because of the deal they had signed with Skybound, and all the VR investments flopping, and all the delays seen up until that point, The Walking Dead absolutely had to be out by the end of 2018, as the cash flow of its, assured success would be needed to save Overstar Killbreeze once more. So, the team had about 12 months to make a AAA online multiplayer shooter from scratch. What's more, since everyone at both Overkill and Starbreeze had worked on other engines throughout their career, very few people were even familiar with Epic's tech, so a bunch of them would be playing a bunch of catch-up after wasting so much time on Ballistic and Valhalla. Senior producers at Starbreeze, who were heading up the project, also did more harm than good, as many of them had never worked on a game this size, this complex, and with this looming release date so near. Excerpts from the Eurogamer article cite employees who claim these senior producers had no idea what they wanted the game to be and would constantly reference other titles they had been playing, saying stuff like, put exploding zombies in it, make it like Far Cry, make it like the Division, should you play the Division, make it like etc. This resulted in, as you can imagine, a fractured, unfocused design, which, shows in the final product. Did these producers go to the George Broussard Academy of Game Design? When E3 2018 rolled around, the response the general public had to the game was less than glowing and more like the vapid gaze of a zombie with half its head blown off. The game was rough, still really early, and didn't excite from a gameplay perspective. The senior producers who were on hand to demo the game didn't want to demoralize the team when they brought home the feedback they had gotten. However, Starbreeze staffers could simply read the online previews that weren't mincing words about what a disaster it was shaping up to be. The producers maintained on not dwelling on that negativity and insisted that all the players and fans at the booth loved the game. Everyone was excited. The phrase, "you can't fix a problem if you pretend there isn't one," is particularly apt here. So, the game just trudged on in that state, with many fundamental aspects of the design receiving little to no attention. So, with all these factors, a strict timeline, an unfamiliar engine, meddling producers, how was The Walking Dead even able to make its November 2018 release date? Why? Courtesy of everyone's favorite crispy chocolate bar, Nestle Crunch! What then resulted was an unforgiving, unrelenting period of crunch that enveloped the team and lasted until launch. People were fainting at their desks, sleeping in the office. Many sought help from the on-site psychiatrist to help alleviate all the pressure and anxiety. It's almost as if a real-life zombie virus began slowly eating away at Starbreeze itself. Everyone just eventually came to realize no matter how hard or fast they worked, they wouldn't be able to deliver a good product. Everyone knew it was going to tank. All of us, we put our blood, sweat, and tears, and our fucking livers and pancreases, everything into that game. No matter how much we would push to do as best as we could, it got shat on. No matter how much you polish a turd, it's still a turd. A turd that went on to sell only 100,000 units at launch, with many of those sales getting refunded on day one. Players cited the game as unfinished, buggy, and often just boring, with nothing really standing out to separate it from the herd of other online shooters. Within Starbreeze, the game was projected to sell in the millions and have an online life of 10 years or more, two goals it was never going to accomplish. This sales disaster is what sent Starbreeze's stocks plummeting, and with it the career of Bo Anderson. As CEO, he was fired by the board of shareholders and would write a company-wide email before his departure, which included such bangers as, "I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have the balls to have a vision and the will to create the future." Now, lots of should-haves and would-haves pop up. To that I say, go build your own company, good luck to you. And of course, who could forget his slapper? Pushing hardware such as Star VR and 3D engines has been exciting and challenging. Too early for the global trend, but boy, that VR headset is amazing. And who else built a VR park in Dubai? Bravo! I know people say that it was stupid now, but you guys did it, and if the trend would have caught up in time, we all be heroes. It's about entertainment, yes! You landed on the moon. Not too many people done that. Wow, that's inspiring. As of right now, Starbreeze/Overkill are barely treading water. A new temporary CEO was hired to try and save the company, and they've been selling off assets to keep the heart pumping, but it remains to be seen how long that can last. So, that's the last shovelful of soil to be thrown onto the grave of, and now it's time for What Else Happened? 2 days after Bo's firing, Swedish authorities raided Starbreeze's offices on the grounds of insider trading and eventually made 2 arrests, or 1 arrest. This is where the story gets a bit messy, or messier if you can believe that. Now, the names of those that were detained were not released, but what is known is that on October 11th, just a few weeks before the release of The Walking Dead, the CFO of Starbreeze, one Sebastian Alskog, quickly sold all his shares and left the company, getting one final payday in before Starbreeze's stock took that massive tumble when the game came out. Now, what about the forgotten brother, Ulf Anderson, the guy who got out when the getting out was good? He is currently working on the sci-fi horror co-op shooter GTFO, which is sassily credited as from the makers of Payday. It's expected to come out this spring. And finally, what about Big Bo? Well, Eurogamer spoke to a friend of his who simply stated he has disappeared from the face of the earth, which is pretty fun in a Swedish Carmen Sandiego sort of way. So that puts the final bullet in the brain of Overkill's The Walking Dead. And if you know of any other apocalyptic video game apocalypses, let me know in the comments below, or please send a zombie virus-free email to McMuscles@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.